What's the worst date you ever had? Met a girl online. Everything seemed okay and the conversations were good, so a few days later we decided to meet for coffee and go for dinner later. I show up to the cafe about 45 minutes early and order a coffee, intending to read for a bit. While I'm reading, I notice an older fellow staring and taking far too much interest in me before leaving. Odd, but okay. Continue to read until about 10 till meetup, when I text the girl that I'm already at the cafe. Shortly after, the odd older fellow comes back in one entrance, and this sets off my spidey sense, so I'm making my way to the other entrance when my date catches my arm to say hi. I tell her we should step out for a minute, getting a bad vibe from this guy. She asks which one, so I describe him. It's her goddamn dad, doing advanced recon for her dates at 24 years old. I was a bit sketched out at that, but thought maybe she had some bad dating history that possibly made sense. I meet her dad. He says they wanted to make sure I was who I said I was and to enjoy the date. He leaves and she says being an only child has its downsides. Makes enough sense. We get coffee and chat for a bit, walk in a nearby park and decide where to go for dinner. We get to my car and she asks if I could take her home to grab a jacket before dinner. No big deal. We arrive at her place, lives with parents, and I talk to her mom and dad while the date grabs a jacket. They seem nice, but overbearing parents. Date calls me back to her room to meet her cat, and the entire time I'm meeting her cat, the parents are hawking nearby, obviously eavesdropping, and it's obvious the date is dragging her feet for some reason. I said something about getting out to dinner before the rush, and her parents, who happened to be walking by, ask where we were going before they start a dialogue on local restaurants, which pivots to ordering delivery carryout, and how we should just do dinner together at their place. I told them no offense, but I'd greatly prefer to dine in someplace relaxed and get to know their daughter. They seem really resistant to this. I'm agitated, and ask if this is how her dates normally go. They said, no, normally we don't let her go out with men, but you passed the background check and your messages to her made you seem nice, like you'd have dinner with us. I was flabbergasted. They ran a background check on me, read our exchanges online as well as the advanced recon, and expected me to have dinner with 2 additional people I hardly knew when I was expecting a date. I told them that will absolutely not work for me, and that they are being extremely over the top with their expectations and precautions. I left. Later received a torrent of text messages and calls to the general sentiment of "you were supposed to be better than this." I don't respond for a day before telling her them this is not normal or healthy. I refuse to be any part of it, and will be blocking their number and filing restraining orders if I find them lurking around. Fucking yikes. That poor girl. It's a long one and a wild ride. Buckle up. I was 22. I started a new job, and met this super cute guy at work. He had a previous girlfriend, who he broke up with about 6 months before we met. She would sometimes randomly come into the shop, and he would always tell her that she couldn't be there, that they had been broken up for months, and she needed to leave him alone. Anyway, he and I started talking and flirted for several months. After about 3-ish months he finally asked me on a date. He's very introverted and I am not, so it took some time for him to feel comfortable enough to ask me out. We go out to dinner, and he's just so sweet and cute and adorably awkward. I really liked him. After dinner he invited me back to his place to talk. I agreed, and we just chilled at his apartment talking, no hanky-panky. I was sitting on one sofa and he was sitting on the other. All of a sudden there was pounding on his door. He calmly gets up and locks it, and I hear a female yell, "Did you just lock the door on me?" It was the ex. I'm sitting on the couch, and he's calmly asking her to please leave through the door. All of a sudden the front window slides open, and she sticks her head in, and starts screaming at him. At this point he's still calmly asking her to leave, while I'm still sitting on the sofa, clutching my mace. She then climbs in through the window and I see this huge woman. She was like 5 feet 11 inches 6 foot tall. I'm 4 feet 11 inches for reference, and I thought, holy shit, I'm going on get my ass kicked. Then she sees me and says, "Who the fuck is this bitch?" All the while he's calmly trying to get her to leave. She went ballistic and started tearing down pictures in the living room, trashing them. Then she moved to the bedroom and I could hear her screaming, throwing things, breaking stuff. All the while my date was standing in the doorway of his room trying to get her to stop. He never raised his voice, and it seemed like this wasn't the first time this happened. He went and got his neighbor, and said, "I need help with this again." So the neighbor came over, but she didn't do anything except stand next to me in the front doorway in shock. Meanwhile, we can hear things escalating with her in the bedroom. I feel like I should mention that she lived with some pretty significant mental illness. He calmly walks in the bedroom, and after a minute or so he walks out of the bedroom with her in a bear hug, guiding her out of his house. Not shoving, not pushing, just as gently as possible. She was kicking and screaming, moving her out of his home. She then went and laid down in the courtyard, rolling around in the grass, crying and screaming, while the three of us, me, Date, neighbor, just stood there for a minute. Date then said he was going to call her cousin to come get her, but before he could make the call, the cousin walked up. He brought her there and was waiting in the car the whole time. Date and cousin went to her, got her calmed down, and convinced her to leave. As she was walking by me, she said, "I'm sorry I called you a bitch. I don't even know who you are," and then left. I sat with my Date, and we kind of processed what just happened, which is when his neighbor told me that this is not the first time, and I encouraged him to call the police. I eventually left, and drove home, about 45 minutes, and called him when I got home, pre-cell phones, to let him know I got home, his request, and to see if he called the police. He did, but not to report what happened, but so they would do a welfare check on her to make sure she was okay. We're celebrating our 27th anniversary this year, 27 years together and 20 years married. He is the kindest, sweetest guy, who has pushed old ladies' broken down cars off the road, helped people get unstuck in the snow, fixes friends' cars for free, and would give you the shirt off his back. I love him. I had a Date send her drink back several times and eventually had our server bring out all of the ingredients in separate glasses so that she could mix it herself, the right way. What's worse is we were both in the service industry at the time. First date after my divorce. She was nothing like her profile picture and just a horrible person. But that not the fun bit. She stalked me to my work van after the date and took down my phone number. On the way home she asked if I would come back and see her, said thanks but no thanks and have a nice life. In the preceding days I received numerous texts and phone calls from her and had to have her number blocked by my phone provider. On New Year's Day at 4 a.m. I receive a call from her ex-husband asking what was wrong with her, that she is a good person, etc., etc. Turns out they went out on NY and got shit-faced together and decided to awl me. I hung up only for them to keep calling me back. Ended up turning my phone off. Woke around 7. Turned my phone on and I had received 20+ voice recordings that were getting more and more threatening. On the last one I could hear them in a car saying they were coming over to get me. Spoke to my neighbor who gets up early and had gone for a run, and he told me there were a couple being arrested around the corner from our place drunk as hell who had hit a light pole. Scary thing is I had my 2 daughters with me that night. In college I hit it off with a girl and agreed to go on a first date to a school hockey game. When I met her there, I realized I had forgotten my wallet, so I had to borrow $5 from her to pay for my ticket. Not a great start, and I could tell I had dug myself an early hole. Then, once we sat down, we realized that neither of us liked hockey at all. I have no idea why we agreed to meet there, but we were both totally uninterested in the game. So we started talking about other things we were into, and I mentioned that I liked board games. She said, "You sound like my grandma." At that point it was clear that neither of us were into this at all, but it was the first period of a hockey game that she had paid $10 whole for, and neither of us felt right leaving. We sat there and stonily watched the rest of the game. Afterwards we said, "Let's hang out sometime," and then never messaged each other again. Then, a few semesters later, my friend called me up all excited about a new girl he was dating. He wanted me to come to a get-together at his apartment and meet her. I walk in, and of course he's sitting on the couch with his arm around the very same hockey-hating girl. I immediately grabbed my wallet, handed her $5, and said, "Thank God! I've been looking for you for 2 years." She laughed, and things went all right after that. It was with an undertaker's assistant. He'd circle every topic of conversation back to corpses. Me, "So, do you know what you're gonna order?" Him, "Well, I was thinking the steak, but I had eaten steak when we got the river guy in, and now it makes me feel queasy." I ended up leaving after half an hour. I'm so sorry, sounds like a horrible date, but from an outside perspective that's hilarious. I agree. I badly want to make jokes about killing the conversation, the date being a bit stiff, but I shouldn't do it. He was over an hour late, no text or call, and when he finally showed up, his excuse was, "Sorry I'm late, my mom had to take a shit." This just became my default excuse every time I'm late to anything ever for the rest of my life. Met her at a bar. She ordered food but didn't eat it since it looked disgusting. It looked fine. So we left to go to a different restaurant, and on the walk there, she kept ducking and glancing at the sky like she was being attacked by bats. She hardly said anything over the whole date. It was like pulling teeth to get her to talk about herself. At the second restaurant she took forever ordering and again didn't eat because the food looked disgusting. Emailing about the date afterwards, she admitted that she was high on ice, which I guess is some kind of meth? What do you expect, man? She was in fucking bat country. What's the worst date you ever had? Leave a comment and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more videos like this one.